Raised bed gardening is my preferred method because there's just so many benefits. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, and I discuss everything gardening so that you can become a better gardener. Today, let's discuss 10 more reasons why raised beds are best. I can talk all day long about the benefits of raised beds, and I'll do that over the course of a series of videos. In an earlier video, I started with 10 reasons why I think raised beds are best for your choice of gardening. Today, it's 10 more. And I put a call out in that earlier video for suggestions from viewers like you as to why you think raised beds are best. And Gail Stritzel responded with my number one choice for this video. It leads to less compacted soil. In open bed gardening, you often have rows, and you'll walk between the rows and tend to the plants. And the plants will often change. So the next year you might be planting here where a row used to be, and now the new row is here. And you can see over time, you're walking across the entire space of your open bed. And when you walk across soil, you compact it. And compaction is bad for a number of reasons. So you should try to avoid compacting your soil in your garden. And that's where raised beds come into play. Because once you build a bed and put your soil into it, you don't need to walk on it ever again. So it greatly reduces some of those bad issues with compaction. In this bed, I've got my garlic growing. I haven't really put any weight of any type on this soil since I planted this garlic more than 6 months ago. I've mulched it. That helps with reducing the compaction as well. Sure, I get snow, and the snow will gradually compact the soil. But the soil in this bed will be looser than soil in one of the open beds that I walk on. The second reason raised beds are best was suggested by Jeff Campbell. Raised beds can lead to intensive planting, and that means getting more plants within a specific space. Because of the clearly defined edges of the raised beds, you can literally plant right up to those edges. That means you can get plants in every single square inch of this bed. In an open garden bed space, you have to allow for pathways. And typically you're not planting right up to the edge of a pathway because as you walk, you might damage the plants. And as you drag your hose, you might damage the plants. You don't have those issues with a raised bed. One of the most common ways of getting intensive planting within a raised bed is square foot gardening. And that clearly defines individual square feet within a bed. And in each of those square feet, you're getting the maximum amount of plants. You can't get that in other methods of gardening. By using raised beds, you can actually get quite creative with the design of your garden. And that idea of creative design came from Carol Palmer. I'm using it in this area of my garden right here. In the front, I've got some painted galvanized raised beds. I have a long 12-inch high raised bed in front of me. This area right here is 6 inches high, covered with a nice wood mulch for my fruit bushes. And behind me are some more decorative beds with a garden archway between them. This allowed me to be creative. That's not the kind of thing you can often get in just an open bed space with pathways alone. Raised beds can be very effective at restricting invasive plants. Now, especially if the bed has a bottom and some solid sides, you can put plants in a raised bed that you might not be able to grow in an open area of your garden. This bed right here is where my horseradish is going to go. I've planted horseradish in the past and it's taken over the area where I put it. So I learned the hard way. I also learned the hard way with mint. And that bed back there is where my mint is going to go. By putting those type of plants in raised beds, I can keep them contained and keep them from running rampant throughout the garden space. If you get a soil test done, particularly from a state university, it will often recommend exactly how much fertilizer you should use within a very specific space. And as you get more and more into gardening, you'll understand just exactly how much compost or organic matter you want to work into your soil. Well, in a raised bed, you have a clearly defined space. This is a 4-foot by 8-foot bed, so I know it's 32 square feet. It's easy for making calculations for fertilizer and soil amendments. And Mike Muting suggested the 5th reason why raised beds are best. And that's that you don't waste amendments. You don't waste fertilizer. In an open bed space, it's usually a guess. So you just apply whatever it is you're amending the soil with. But in a raised bed, you can be very precise and you can get your soil to the best quality that you can because there's no wasting. It all stays in the bed in the amount that you put it. The 6th reason why raised beds are best came from Small Country Quest, and I completely agree. Raised beds look good. Now, this is entirely subjective, and each gardener can set up their garden however they want. But many of us really like the look of a raised bed when done properly. It might be stained wood, or stone, or brick. There's no coincidence that some of the major gardens in the world have some beautiful raised beds for the plants that they're growing. I like to come out in the garden and just enjoy the space. Well, I could do that in an open area where I was just growing plants for food, but I enjoy it so much more when I can just sit back and observe and enjoy because it looks good. Raised beds allow for easy irrigation, especially if you build them to a comfortable size for how you water. You could water an entire bed within just seconds. And the height of the bed becomes an automatic hose guard. So I'm never going to be dragging this hose across my plants. And with a little extra planning, I could set up a drip irrigation system within this bed that is easily movable to other beds in future years. A raised bed is one way to save water because you're only watering within the bed. You don't have to get water on any of the pathways like you might if you were gardening in an open space. The 8th reason that raised beds are best is because raised beds tend to warm up faster in the spring. They thaw out before open ground. And it doesn't need to be a high bed. Even a bed that's just a few inches above the basic soil level will warm up faster. Snow will melt on those raised beds. And if you cover your raised beds with plastic, you get even a greater warming. I measured the temperature of this bed, and then I compared it with one of the beds that I have covered with plastic. It's not a big difference, but the plastic helps absorb and retain some of that heat. And so the soil is warmer than a lot of the open condition. That means I can get seeds in the ground sooner and the plants will start growing long before I might be able to plant in an open area. Raised beds allow you to maintain clean pathways, or as Jay Dixon called it, a tidy appearance. Because for those of us that have gardened for a while, in an open area where we're moving tools and hoses and pruning plants and harvesting, before you know it, the pathways can get pretty cluttered, messy, not look good at all. But in this clearly defined space with these nice edges, we can weed very easily. And especially if we mulch our pathways, we can keep them looking very nice. And that gets back to the idea that raised beds can really beautify a garden space. So don't forget the pathways, because raised beds really do make them look better. If your landscape has a lot of tree roots that have kept you from gardening in an ideal area that you'd like to, well, think about raised beds. The 10th reason raised beds are best is because you can put them on top of tree roots and start growing right away. You don't have to dig up the roots. Now, I do recommend that you have a bed like this one with a solid bottom, or else the roots will grow up through the good raised bed soil. Normally, I don't think you should have a bottom. The native soil should have a good interface with the soil in the bed. But with tree roots, put a bottom on your raised bed and you can start growing anywhere that you couldn't otherwise grow. If you want to see those 10 earlier suggestions about why raised beds are best and learn more, go ahead and click on one of these videos. And if you want to become a better gardener, well then subscribe to the GardenerScott channel and be sure to click the bell. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.